Hello student, welcome to this course MGP 015. Today I am going to discuss this topic action research, which is part of the research methodology. Now, why do we do action research? I think it's been very important to understand action research because it brings out a change in the society. In order to understand the action research, let us get into this debate. Why do we need to do action research? So in this lecture, we will discuss various tools and methodology to carry out action research. It deals with the key principles, gender perspective, critique, examples, and the institutions that have undertaken this type of research studies while working in the field. We will also discuss importance of evaluation in action research and also throws light on various result indicators at 3 level, micro level, macro level, and so on. So let us know the objective. The main objectives are to explain the concept, need, and aims of action research, to describe various tools, methodologies, and method of participatory research, critique participatory research from gender perspective, and design a research proposal for participatory research study. Now let me explain to you this concept and the need of the action research. To begin with, what is action research and what is the purpose of this kind of research? Action research is a community-based method aimed at transforming the status quo. It is participatory as this research sees the respondent as a co-creators of the knowledge. I think this is very important, that the knowledge production which is done by the respondent themselves and is potentially empowering to the community. It places the research tools in the hands of the researched and minimizes the hierarchy between the researched and the researcher. It enables the community to identify their wants, their strengths, and initiate change with the support of the researcher. The targeted community is involved in the identification of the problem, the planning, and execution of the project. Such research can begin with the consciousness-raising discussion, identification of available resources to initiate change, and initiating the change, which is, I think, very important in order to understand this. So creating space for the participation in the research is often cited as what is most important in the research on participatory development. So therefore, the attempts as these are the made in participatory research so that the hierarchical relationship associated with the research between the researcher and those being researched can be broken down. It's very important to understand the aims of the action research as to develop shared ownership of the research, to enable other participants to direct the research process and have a say on what to do and how to do, create opportunities for collective data gathering and analysis, to create the space for participants to reflect on the research and provide critical feedback, build trust and non-threatening environment, allow research to progress toward action and doing if desired by other participants. Now, women's empowerment is a central aim of the feminist action research, and we all of us knows, because you need to also look at this debate of the action research. And I would in fact suggest to you I will recommend to all of you to read the book Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which was way back written, and this is all about the study of the Black people in order to understand the education system, the schooling system, and their experiences. So close relationship between researchers and the participants engaged in the feminist participatory action research projects have brought joy and insight, but also challenges. Through the project, the research team collaborates to enhance the participants' quality of life, career, and among some, develop feminist consciousness. The methodological and ethical issues that derive from the closeness of the relation between many of the participants and the researcher also makes it imperative to explore their subjective. the issues associated with interpreting participant stories, action, and conversations, the risk of perpetuating uncritical assimilation or ideological baggage, and the challenge of matching practice with ideas of emancipation for all women. Hence, it becomes imperative to start the discussion with the types of needs women have. And I think it's been very important to understand the needs of the category of the gender, which also are different, because the male and female, or the men or the woman, they do have the different needs. So these may be related to the roles women play in any society, or help them to look beyond their gender roles and aim at providing ways and means for empowerment. They are termed as a practical and strategic gender needs. And practical and strategic gender needs, I think we need to understand this term very categorically, and I would emphasize to all of you to read the work of Carolyn Moses' work, in which she argued that on gender planning, methodology provides definition that distinguish between practical and strategic gender needs. Practical gender needs are those that women identify in their socially accepted roles in society. Practical gender needs do not challenge the gender division of labor or women's subordinate position in society, although rising out of them. Practical gender needs are responsive to the immediate perceived necessity identified within a specific context. And according to the Moser, again, strategic gender needs are the needs women identify because of their subordinate position to men in their society. They relate to gender division of labor, power, and control, and may include such issues as legal rights, domestic violence, equal wages, and so on. So meeting strategic gender needs helps women to achieve greater equality. The distinction between these two types of needs can provide a useful tool to aid us in analyzing how gender is being addressed and proposed in policy or the project intervention. Now, it's been important to understand again the terminology participatory tools. The participatory tools used the participatory research appeared to be somewhat similar to participatory rural appraisal, PRI techniques. However, the tools shared in these lectures have been specifically developed to address gender and social stratification. The first participatory tools that can be used with small group of women in a popular tool often used at the beginning of a process. It is known as a landscape mapping and is similar to transit walks. This exercise consists of having a small group of women take on a walk through an area where each of the women meets her survival needs. In this exercise, women are asked to tell the researcher about their practical strategic needs. This is followed with an exercise to map out the identified area with the some group of women. The second tool that can be used in the modified version of the life history interview conducted at their homes. These interviews reveal a great deal about the background of the woman, which enables the researcher to get to know each of them on more individual level. It reveals information about their migration from rural areas to the city, their educational background, when they started working in the city, their employment experiences, and much more. Flip chart paper can be used so that the woman can see what is being written. This exercise helps in preparing a checklist of the priorities. Now, participatory research methodology, we will just try to understand this also further. So we will discuss various methodologies that are used by the researcher in the process of the participatory research. And there are innovative applications. So consciousness raising method is one of them. There is a strategy that has grown out of the feminist attempt to understand women's lived experiences within autonomous women's group. Because of the feminist distrust of hierarchies, there is no leader. Sharing of ideas, experiences, analytical version takes place in non-threatening environment. Then group diaries. It draws from psychological literary techniques aimed at unfolding of the stream of consciousness. Anonymous entries are made in the diary of the group. These recordings of stories, anecdotes, and recollections written by the group may be discussed in group interviews and then documented. Dramatic role play. This is an effective method that can trigger discussion in any group. By presenting the issue under discussion in the form of drama, the researcher can get the group member to reflect on their attitudes and express them. The process helps to generate consciousness on issues and enables participants to introspect on their values and ideas. Genealogy and networking traces is one of the very important segment of it, and which is used in a biographical writings. This involves locating the history of the woman's life within the context of a relationship, friendship, and the origin. Non-authoritative community-based research. This technique is useful in research that has to empower the community. This involves gathering data on the issues that affect the community and then presented back to the targeted community to make sense of the evidence, emphasize in placing on the respondents and on subjectivity. And few more points which I just wanted to flag. For instance, the conversation or the dialogue. This technique could be the face-to-face group discussion or on the internet, because it involves conversation and discussion across a wide spectrum of the e-group members. The division between the researcher and the researched is minimized. Based on the topic at hand, discussion may be triggered through the impersonalization of historical person or through focused discussion on events or issues. In the research process, the line between the researcher and participant are blurred. Question asked and the ideas expressed are free floating. Using intuition or writing association, that's also been very important. There are techniques that seeks to, uncover streams of consciousness. This use a way of blended dreams, readings, and thoughts in which the writer brings out themes in a deep, non-chronicle, non-topical, intuitive process. It premises on the understanding that language is a male-centered, it cannot express women experiences. Therefore, to uncover the many layers of the experiences in women, it is necessary to break accepted norms of writing and allow for a free flow consciousness. Identification instead of keeping distance is a very important phenomenon here. Based on the feminist critique of the notion of the objectivity in research, this technique calls for the empathy with the subject. It requires that the researcher sees reality from the standpoint of the researched and makes evident her bias in writing so that readers appreciate the points of view of the researched. This is particularly useful in studying marginalized groups whose viewpoints have rarely entered our theoretical frameworks. Now, studying unplanned personal experiences. Personal experiences, for example, of illness or operation alone or with additional data is used as a basis of study. Photography or talking picture techniques. This involves a collection of pictures taken at certain intervals to be used in an interview kit. Thus, duly categorized pictures used within the questionnaire are useful to jolt memory. This technique has, varieties of use. It can be part of awareness generation activities which can be documented and presented as a group diaries, or it could be used in oral history, life history narratives. Family albums, for instance, could elicit anecdotes and recollections. There can be other forms of analysis of these pictures in themselves. Speaking freely into tape recorders or answering long essay-type questionnaires, these techniques involve a set of questions sent to the respondent with the instruction to record the answer on tape. Description of the innovative applications developed in the response to the top-down methodology used for the development research during the 1950s and 1960s. Participatory research methodology stressed, bottom-up approach guided by the principle of participation, influenced by social scientists from the global south, such as I mentioned to you, Paulo Freire's work, participatory approaches, critic research, and development in general as something that is done to people by the governments, development agencies, international NGOs from the global north. In response, these methodologies stress the importance of recognizing that those who are the target of the research and development policies should have a say in their formulation, and the local knowledge should be privileged. Feminist researchers have adopted many of these methods, and participatory research methodology are among the most used in the field of gender-specific research. Participatory approaches have also been adopted for the use in monitoring and evaluation of the development program. Supporters of these approaches suggested that, and I quote, that participation is the key to substantiable development initiatives, since it will lead to the building on existing potential and capacities, a greater sense of ownership on the part of stakeholders, increased commitment to the objectives and outcome, longer term social sustainability, increased self-help capacity, stronger and more democratic institution and partnership, and unquote. And there are key principles when one is talking about bottom-up approach applied to all the development activities, including research and program design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Empowerment through facilitation, supporting capacity building, especially among the marginalized people, to analyze and improve their lives by validating and privileging their experiences and knowledge. Facilitated dialogue, used to recognize the various ways in which power operates, linking the personal experiences to the political in order to understand local level problems as a part of the larger political theoretical context, a process referred to the conscientization. So it's been very important that to also understand the traditional and innovative methods. A combination of the written, oral, visual communication methods are used in the design, implementation, and documentation of the participatory research. These include theater, visual imaginary, collectively written songs, cartoons, community meeting, community self-portraits, videotape recording. Gender perspectives of the women working in gender and development have both critiqued the participatory approach and offered suggestions to strengthen their applicability to gender and other social differences. Use clear and commonly used terminology as a conceptual clarity lays the basis of the practical application. Problematic terms such as gender, empowerment, participation, and community needs careful attention. Develop appropriate methodology in each circumstances. For example, understand the practical condition that can affect women's involvement. And I think one of the ways in which one should look at further going the right best approach is, one can explore. So right-based approach, RBA, is a description making a shift from satisfying the basic need-based approach to fulfilling and securing the fundamental human rights. The Office of the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights has defined the right-based approach to the development as a conceptual framework that integrates the norms, standards, and principles of the international human rights system into the plans, policies, and process of the development. And you would see that United Nations Population Fund describe a right-based approach as one of the strive to secure the freedom, well-being, dignity of all people everywhere within the framework of the essential standards and principal duties and obligation. Development is conceived as a right to be realized rather than need to be fulfilled. As such, individuals and groups are seen as a right holders and government and non-state actors as a duty bearers with obligation. So the key principle which one need to understand, although there is no universal framework for the right-based approach, the following principles are the common in the approach. An explicit link of the human rights, it might be, include the economic, social, civil, political, culture, B, it might be capacity building for the awareness and realization of right. C is the accountability, empowerment, participation, non-discrimination, and attention to vulnerable groups. Now, gender perspective is one of them, and there is no one formula for using the right-based approach as a gender research methodology. Rather, the approach should be viewed as a vision and set of tools to be used in strategic ways. Generally, a feminist interpretation of right-based approach for the purpose of gender research, policy, and analysis include a focus on non-discrimination and gender inequality. So recognition of right to self-define multiple identities, including gender, class, ethnicity, sexuality, and other variables can be counted. Clear understanding of the empowerment and the participation and the application of these principles throughout research, implementation, evolution process. Emphasis on the nature of the rights, social collectively as well as individual rights, accountability of the governments, bilateral, multilateral donors, private contractors, NGO, etc. for respecting and working to strengthen human rights. Transport comprehensive policy responses to the structural cause of the problem, for instance, poverty, as well as the concrete manifestation for that, concrete and transparent legal responses to rights violation in the process of the development. Because human rights include the sort of economic, social, civil, political, and cultural rights, the research needed to provide a comprehensive analysis must be collected from the variety of the sources using qualitative and quantitative data. Because the right-based approach stresses participation and empowerment, quantitative methods are often the most useful in terms of fostering a strong sense of involvement and ownership within local communities. And therefore, there has also been a sort of critique to this research which we need to understand. And the main critics are as follows: the historically problematic nature of the woman's relationship to the state, to the lawmakers. Right-based approach is a difficult. State itself often ignores or work against the woman's need, rights, and interest. In some instances, can be the main perpetuator of the gender-based oppression or the discrimination. The historic emphasis on the civil and political rights has led to the underdevelopment framework for economic and social and cultural rights. And therefore, the cultural relativism influences the discussion on women's human rights. For example, the indigenous or certain religious principle regarding the gender rights might conflict with the so-called, quote-unquote, universal human rights framework. An emphasis on highly technical legal frameworks and language can sometimes work against the idea of the empowerment, making the concept of the human rights hard to understand for the general public. Therefore, the accountability mechanism tends to focus on the governments and individuals in the global south, leaving for mechanism in place for accountability of the governments, donor agency, development organization, and individual researchers for global north. The transformative potential of the right-based approach is limited. The rights in question must be secured through the dominant neoliberal economic and social framework, meaning that certain rights may be secured, but the overall structure of the operation and unequal distribution left intact. And there are different kinds of things which one can go. For example, a variety of the methodology can be combined for use under the right-based approach, including women's empowerment framework. International institutions that have used the methodology include the Association for Women Rights Development, United Nations High Commission for Refugees, United Nations Population Fund, FAO, World Bank, and CARE, DFID, and so on. So methods of the participatory research then can be seen. There can be many different ways of carrying out the participatory research. The choice of the method depends on the topic of the research, resources available, and the ease of the handle a particular method by the researcher. Some of the commonly used methods are discussed in the following. Is a social gender analysis takes project as a stakeholder through the series of exercises that analyze the disadvantage faced by the various group in the research area and the resources and the strategies required for them to sort of achievement, social sustainability, and then it includes the class, caste, gender, access and control to the resources, benefit from the participation and link between local, national or the global levels, and all kinds of the elements like, for instance, the social gender analysis workshop discussion. These are some of the ways which one can look at this. Another group of the tool involves the field-based techniques. Perhaps the best known of these techniques is the participatory rural appraisal, which evolved from rapid rural appraisal, originally developed for the rural areas and farming system by the Institute of the Development Studies in Sussex, England, and PRA has spread around the world to many sectors, including research involving in urban poor. Now, PRA, employee groups, animation techniques, and the problem analysis exercise in promoting sharing of the information and joint action among stakeholders. To aim that, PRAs use semi-structured interview, focus group, wealth ranking, community meeting, need assessment, mapping, transient walks, and other participant observation techniques. And one can always go and look into this debate further by representing a quite different tradition of the participatory action research or participatory research, both workshop and field work, but with two elements that make it distinction from each other's approaches. Is the first, the participatory research or the participatory action research takes a relatively longer time to implement, months, even years, rather than days or weeks. Secondly, it emphasizes the issues of power more than most other methods, because both in its analysis and its action uses a more a positional framework vis-a-vis elites, other than the participatory methods, which tends to co-opt elite involvement and acceptance. So apart from these distinctive features, these methods make use of full range of the workshop facilitation techniques, field observation methods, and group dialogue methods. Research in this tradition have also employed, computerized data analysis, oral history, popular theater, and other media, and many other techniques. The insider-outsider, dialogue is, monitored carefully, and in fact, if you're interested, please go and read some of the Black feminist work, where these views, particularly Patricia Hill Collins and others talk about insider-outsider, which will also help you to make understand in a deeper manner that these debates are insider and outsider, how one is talking about in context of the race, and which further helps you that who are on the margin of the local communities. So the same obstacle faced by the other approaches, like obstacles related to the class, gender, ethnicity, wealth, and power, and I already mentioned you one of the reading. So often PR and PAR is often carried out by the social movements and frequently has a longer term goal of the broader structural information. So it's been important to understand, the developing results and the indicators in order to understand, these debates. So participatory planning and evaluation efforts demand simple, reliable indicators of the development results that are agreed upon by the participants and the other stakeholders. In case of the anti-poverty, human rights, and basic needs research, the most crucial results indicators relate to money and power. It is also important that these indicators of the results should be identified at different levels, macro and macro level, although they are the most difficult and complex indicator to achieve. They are ultimately the most important test of whether a development intervention has succeeded. Therefore, in order to understand this debate of the action research, which I categorically mentioned that action research helps us to understand and to bring out the social change, what we try to explain is that, what are the key principles, how do we go about the gender perspective, what are the critiques, how institution can take place, and in order to understand that how, there are multiple ways in which one can look at the category and the methodology of the social, action research in order to understand, so, particularly from the feminist or the gender perspective. We also dealt and discussed various aspects of it. Why do we need this concept? What are the aim of the action research? What are the tools? How different methodology and methods of the participatory research can be, dealt with, and how, one would look at the gender perspective in order to understand participatory research study. Um, Thank you very much.